the Prime Minister of the Republic of Italy, Massimo D'Alema, and Mrs. D'Alema, il Presidente del Consiglio Italiano, Massimo D'Alema, e Signora D'Alema, the President of the Federal Republic of Brazil, Fernando Cardoso, and Mrs. Cardoso, il Presidente della Repubblica Federativa del Brasile, Fernando Cardoso, e Signora Cardoso, the Chancellor of the Federal Republic of Germany, Gerhard Schröder, il Cancelliere della Repubblica Federale di Germania, Gerhard Schröder, the Prime Minister of the French Republic, Lionel Jospin, il Primo Ministro della Repubblica Francese, Lionel Jospin, the Prime Minister of the Republic of Portugal, Antonio Gutierrez, il Primo Ministro della Repubblica di Portogallo, Antonio Gutierrez, the President of the Commission of the European Union, Romano Prodi, and Mrs. Prodi, il Presidente della Commissione dell'Unione Europea, Romano Prodi, e Signora Prodi,
Please be seated. Ladies and gentlemen, if I might have your attention. And I know how difficult it is to give attention at the historic moment at which we find ourselves. Here we are in this magnificent villa, which has existed since the flowering of the Renaissance in this wonderful world city. And we have, as was the custom here hundreds of years ago, a gathering of the leaders of the world, literally a gathering of the leaders of the world. That phrase is most palpably caught and obvious to all in the wonderful gift we have this evening of having here in New York University's home in Florence the leaders of government and state whom we've just welcomed to this room. But it is also clear in the extraordinary group of leaders coming from all communities, scholars, artists, business leaders, leaders of opinion who are gathered in this room. And on behalf of New York University School of Law, please allow me to extend to each of you our deep gratitude for your participation in an event which is unique in the history of academic institutions. We at the law school value your participation and thank each one of you for being here. Now, formally to welcome you, I'm proud to present a partner and leader for me, a friend and a model, the president of New York University, Dr. L.J. Oliva.
Quite extraordinary to be here in this venue. I've been here 20 years, and this surely must be the most extraordinary night. We welcome you, and we welcome you to a quintessentially global moment where university, and God bless our law school for leading us in this endeavor, to be global in our view. And so we welcome you all in that spirit. The folks who are here, you've introduced, but let me make sure that you know Tony Blair, the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, and his wife Sherry. Fernando Henrique Cardoso, President of the Republic of Brazil, and his wife Ruth. William Jefferson Clinton, President of the United States, First Lady Hillary Rodham Clinton. Massimo D'Alema, Prime Minister of the Republic of Italy, and his wife Linda. Antonio Guterres, Prime Minister of Portugal. Lionel Jospin, Prime Minister of the Republic of France. Gerhard Schroeder, Chancellor of the Federal Republic of Germany. Romano Prodi, President of the European Union Commission, and his wife Flavia. Javier Solana, Minister of Defense of the European Union, and his wife Concepcion. And Juan Somavia, Director General of the International Labor Organization, and those three we will hear from tonight and tomorrow. So, quite extraordinary. And the only thing I have to say, and say it quickly, is to say that Sir Harold Acton, whose benefaction this wonderful set of villas, because there are 5 and 57 acres, represents something quite extraordinary, and he would have been enormously overjoyed, actually, tonight. The name of this place is La Pietra, the stone, and it's a milestone. It's the milestone of the old San Gallo Gate of the city of Florence. But more than that now. There are, at this moment, 206 students from New York University and other American universities all around us on this wonderful estate. So from his notion, the first notion, that students should find joy here. The second milestone is the milestone of scholarly exchange. And so with my colleagues, God bless them, from the European University Institute and from the University of Florence, Patty Masterson and Paolo Blasi, our faculty and our scholars join here in this wonderful city together on a global scene. And the third notion of his was that great moments of global exchange should occur here. And if that has ever happened, it has happened now. Perhaps not since the Battle of Pavia, and Charles V and Francis I and the Medici joined here, has it happened in such an extraordinary way. So for the 3 moments of students and scholars and great international exchange, Sir Harold would have said this was a very special moment. For me, I promised him in that room in there that New York University would look after that notion and look after that heritage. And I thank you all, and I thank John Sexton for making it possible for me to say, I kept my promise. Lastly, we say thank you to our friends in Italy, and especially to our friends in the city of Florence. These years with me have been quite extraordinary in this city. We made a promise to each other that New York and the city of Florence would march together into the next millennium. And so that's a promise we could keep together as well. Every time that I fly in here, I am, my ancestry is Genovese. Apologies to all. But every time over those years that I've flown into this town, it's happened more and more that I may be from Genoa by my origins, but in my heart and soul, I am Florentine now. So let it be that the welcome that we received when we came to this wonderful city, we extend to you now, and that all Florentines say to you, welcome, and that this weekend should be quite as spectacular as any ever seen in this great city. We thank you very much.
Now, I can see already that this is a crowd that took my mandate to be respectful to me and even to my president far too seriously, because you should please begin to eat. As you eat, I would ask you not to speak to each other, because I do have something that is important to us at New York University, and especially to us at the law school, to do. As you begin to enjoy the food, let me give you just a little bit of food for thought. from the perspective of New York University School of Law, this evening is part of a grand initiative. 6 years ago, we took a chance. We announced that the forces of globalization and the spread of democracy and free economies were such that they were irresistible and irresistibly attractive to people who practiced law. And that the instrument of law, the instrument that we use at the law school, was to play a vital role in the shaping of the world that is becoming, and becoming so rapidly and becoming so dramatically different. And so, as I say, we took a chance. We announced, even as one of the great law schools of the world, that we were going to do something that great educational institutions don't often do. Great education institutions tend to be risk-averse, and we said, we're going to take a risk. We're going to announce that we're going to reformulate the way we teach and think about law. A research faculty, a learning community of students, we're going to do that different. And we announced our Global Law School Initiative. We were emboldened to do that in part because of the undeniable forces we observed, but I will tell you, very important in that process was the encouragement of critical people. The person who's made this process of conversation among the heads of state, which initially started with a conference at New York University School of Law over a year ago and then continues through today. Dwight Opperman, one of America's great benefactors of law, the chair of my board, Lester Pollack, a model for all of our students. But important in that process was a woman to whom I spoke frequently of the idea. And I hope that even in the presence of the heads of state and the first ladies of so many spectacular countries, it would not be amiss for me, because of her special role with us, to single her out for mention. And I have to say it is a multi-level connection to our law school, a level that has both personal and professional sides to it. As President Clinton and I walked down the hall outside, he put his arm around me and he said, when we first walked the beach of Martha's Vineyard 15 years ago, who would have thought we would have ended up here? I'll tell you, a lot of people thought that he would have ended up where he did, but nobody thought I would have ended up here. But that was the first time that I met Hillary Rodham Clinton, and I met her in the context of a week among friends where we had all agreed to read a set of books and talk about them. It was a world of ideas in which I first met her, and she dazzled me and my wife Lisa, and my entire family then and ever since. She is my daughter Katie's role model. So there's a personal side to this, but there's a long history with our law school as well. In my first year as dean, and I'm now a dinosaur among American deans. I've been a dean for 12 years. The average time of an American dean is 3 or 4 years. But it was 12 years ago that she visited our law school for the first time. I remember a spectacular visit in 1991 when an auditorium full of students sat enthralled as she spoke to them about children and the importance of devoting their lives to end the law to children. So it is because of that long history, a history I guess was capped 2 years ago when the students who do our law journal and who each year vote to dedicate an entire year of student research and writing and publication of their journal to a person, and they came in and they said, we would like to devote this year to the First Lady of the United States because of the role model that we see her as being. And of course, for her role in encouraging us along the pathway towards creating the first truly global law school and then seeing a way that this process that culminates and continues this evening fit into that as a natural process, and her invaluable role in putting this process together. For her work, whether it be for women or for children, for civil liberties, for human rights, we would like to present to Hillary Rodham Clinton the first Global Law School Leadership Award. And I'm going to present this to her, but I want to read the inscription to you. To Hillary Rodham Clinton, for her leadership and tireless efforts to further the transatlantic dialogue on progressive governance in an age of globalization, for giving voice to women and children around the world, and for advancing civil society, you are our role model, the faculty and students of New York University School of Law, November 20th, 1999. Ladies and gentlemen, the First Lady of the United States, Hillary Rodham Clinton. I can usually tease her to make some remarks, but we in New York have noticed she's gotten timid lately, and in any case, please enjoy your dinner. There's no use my hiding it any longer. Even I think through translation, for those of you who are operating through translation, you can detect my Brooklyn accent. Because when I say that I'm the Dean of the School of Law, usually in the United States, outside of New York, I have to spell that, L-A-W, not L-O-R-E. It's a very heavy Brooklyn accent. I say that because I'm going to ask you, please, now to do it as we do it in Brooklyn. And continue to enjoy your meal so that we can move our program along, even as we begin to enjoy some additional intellectual delight. As you do that, it's my great pleasure to introduce a friend, but I have to concede a derivative friend through my president, Jay Oliva. Patty Masterson is well known to us at NYU. He became known to us when he and Jay joined a group of rectors or presidents of universities in world cities like Dublin, where he was when he joined the group, or Florence, where he continues to be a member of that group. I'm delighted to give you our partner, our friend, a man to whom NYU gave an honorary degree a couple of years ago, Patty Masterson.
Distinguished presidents, heads of government, ladies and gentlemen. My compatriot Oscar Wilde once apologized for writing a long letter because he hadn't time to write a short one. Similarly, I believe that the length of one's introductory comments should be in inverse proportion to the distinction of the principal speaker. In which case, I should now sit down and hand over to Mr. Prodi at once. But who can resist an audience? And what an audience. I've thought about how to do... I've thought about how to describe Mr. Prodi very briefly and simply. without going through the whole business of recounting his many remarkable achievements as a distinguished professor, a visionary politician, a most effective prime minister, and now a widely welcomed new president of the European Commission. If I were to portray him in biblical imagery, I might describe him as wise as a serpent and simple as a dove. But that doesn't quite capture the distinctive characteristic of the man. I think it should be closer to the mark to say that he is richly endowed with that much admired Renaissance virtue of sprezzatura. Sprezzatura can be understood as the seemingly effortless grace with which the truly noble spirit achieves great things. Mr. Prody's many achievements as a scholar and a statesman are accomplished with just such graceful, non-assuming nonchalance, which is truly impressive. Moreover, this uncontrived virtuosity is not confined to handling matters of government and community affairs. Pace those of you who walk and jog. But Mr. Prody is also a man who, when the inclination takes him, will get up on his bicycle and cycle from Bologna to Florence of an afternoon and think nothing of it. Ladies and gentlemen, we have found a European leader rich in sprezzatura. I ask you to welcome President Romano Prodi.
Ladies and gentlemen, all authorities, I am very grateful to make you this brief conversation on the subject that has been asked to deal a new economy, new policy, the role of the European Union. I shall try to be very brief, and I ask you to forgive that on dinner I should be even more and more brief. But the European dimension is in this moment very important, very taking, and very difficult to analyze. And the art of government, as you know, has never been easy, and the difficulties have greatly increased in modern times. Technological progress, social change have gone hand in hand, but social and technological change has been gathering such enormous pace in the last decade that now is needed joint action and forward planning. And we have to manage our affairs in the next century. And this problem that is common to all modern democracy is applies in a very unique way to the family of nations we make up the European Union, because European Union is a very unique construction. In the aftermath of the Second World War, the overriding aim of this founding was to achieve peace in Europe. European Union was done only because of peace in the beginning, to put an end to centuries and centuries of bloody conflict and social upheaval. So European unity was first a political concept born of high ideals and noble aspiration. Its subsequent history was inevitably dominated by the process of economic integration. Meanwhile, integration now has begun in other fields too. The member states are now cooperating more closely on justice, home affairs, issues such as how to deal with asylum seekers and how to combat international crime and terrorism. They are also moving towards establishing a common foreign and security policy. As European unity becomes a reality, At all these levels, the fundamental problem of governance facing the whole of the industrialized world acquire a unique and distinct European dimension. This problem must, of course, be tackled primarily at the national level. Primary, I repeat, at the national level. But in the European Union, they have a supranational aspect, which is why I have been invited to speak you about them today. Broadly speaking, the challenges facing the European Union fall into two main categories. First, economic and social issues, and second, geopolitical issues. Let's take the economic and social issues first. The structural changes taking place in the European society are both deep and wide. Life expectancy is steadily increasing, while birth rates are falling in spite of Tony efforts. In other words, the population is aging, and this means a shrinking workforce. At the same time, our industry are having to face the challenge of globalization and the pressure of competing on rapidly changing world markets. The drive to become lean, fit, and efficient has all too often mean downsizing and thus has created unemployment. Europe must find a way of translating competitiveness and efficiency into economic growth which creates new jobs. At the same time, we want to preserve our European way of life in a caring society, what I call the European social model. This model, combining social justice with economic growth, is already being emulated by the countries applying for European membership. They do not simply want to be part of an enlarged and single market, they also want to adopt the European social model. This brings me to the geopolitical challenges facing us. The European Union, despite its critics, is proving such a success that a dozen other European countries are already queuing to join. The Union is set to expand from 15 to 20, 25, perhaps 30 member states in the medium term, one of the most important events in history. Only taking account of the applying countries, we pass from 374 million people to 500 million people. As we contemplate enlargement, we in the European Union feel a great sense of responsibility, and together with our new family members, we want to create a new European society. We want to build a stable and prosperous Europe in peace, security, freedom, democracy, rule of law, and respect of human rights. All very laudable, you say, but how we set about it? What is our strategy? And if we are to have a realistic chance of achieving those goals in the medium term and of sustaining prosperity and social cohesion in the longer term, we must lose no time in addressing those economic and social problems I referred earlier. Let's describe in short time these problems. First of all, social and economic challenges. Technologies and labor market are changing, and with them, Europe's educational and training needs. European population is aging, and welfare system needs a urgent change. The question for the European Union is this: how can we reorganize the welfare state and the employment market in order to create jobs and boost productivity, while at the same time modernizing the European social model? It's a difficult challenge. By way of comparison, let's look at what the United States has achieved over the last 5-10 years. US has been outstandingly successful in creating jobs, managed to achieve the extraordinary combination of low inflation, high growth, now in position to compete on equal terms with the United States, which has similar structure of trade to us, and over the next 10-20 years, Europe will reap the full benefits of being a single market and having a single currency. A second reason is the problem of Europe's underdeveloped service sector. If Europe today had the same employment levels in the service sector as US, we would have more than 30 million extra jobs. This is double the total number of people currently unemployed in Europe. Another striking difference is the number of women at work. The difference is 21 million jobs. Europe is lagging behind US in this field more than in any other field. So the American challenge to Europe is twofold. First, can Europe create jobs as successfully as the US has done? Second, can Europe do it while maintaining a fairer distribution of opportunities and income than in the United States? As President of the European Commission, I want to accept this dual challenge, but I want also to issue a European challenge to the US. Can you match our social achievement in terms of fair distribution of opportunity and income? As far as job creation, I think we have made a good start. The treaty revision in Amsterdam and the job summit in Luxembourg led to an agreement on a European employment strategy with European-wide guidelines and highly developed action at the national level. The strategy is concentrated on getting people back to work and on raising employment standards. It's based on 4 pillars: employability, entrepreneurship, adaptability, and equal opportunities. The first pillar, employability, is about equipping the workforce with the skill they need now and will need for the jobs in the future. The second, entrepreneurship, involves a new enterprise policy to make easier to start, run, and develop business. The third, adaptability, is about a new working life policy to handle the process of technological and organizational change. The social partners are being invited to take the lead in striking a new balance between flexibility and security in employment. The fourth pillar concerns equal opportunities between men and women, a new policy for reconciliation of working life and family life. The way forward on these pillars is primarily a matter for decision at national level, not dictated by political ideology, but by a pragmatic bottom-up process of consultation and debate. The European Commission can help by bringing together the main actors involved, national and local authorities, private sector representatives, economists, and other experts to pool their ideas, compare experience in the different member states, exchange best practices, and carry out benchmarking. To this discussion, we can contribute with our own wealth of technical expertise. Our first major opportunity to do so will be the next year Lisbon Summit on Employment, Economic Reform, and Social Cohesion. The summit will launch the whole new economy debate in Europe at the highest level, but it's vital that we receive grassroots input from economic players at the level of all society. And one of the keys to the United States' recent success in creating jobs and boosting productivity has been the new information technology. Europe has been slow to embrace this technology, and I strongly believe the most important step we should now take is to follow the US example and make the transition to becoming a knowledge-based society. The transition will have profound and wide social and economic effects. Information and communication technologies are clearly going to reshape European society. For one thing, they will make knowledge goods available very cheaply for an increasing number of people, and that means a lot of new opportunities for entrepreneurs. This is already the case. It is now far easier to launch a high-tech business than it was only a few years ago in Europe. But transformation to a knowledge-based society has to be done in a way that fosters social inclusion and participation. The information technology revolution alone will not close the gap between the haves and the have-nots in European society. It might even widen the gulf between gifted and less gifted, between wealthier and poor families, for the simple reason that more gifted and more affluent individuals find easier to acquire information technologies. To help overcome this problem, we must make a concerted effort to spread education through the European population, and we shall do so in the new wide program for all European youngs. The subject of education brings me to the main social challenge, that is welfare reform. The welfare states in the various national forms is the greatest single achievement of Western democracy and one of the greatest achievements of the 20th centuries. By providing social justice alongside economic growth, it forms the very basis of the European social model. But there is a fundamental question to answer. Can we afford the European social model, our pension system, our job security, our social dialogue, if we want to reach the same level of employment as US? Can we retain our welfare system and still compete with high-tech now countries or low-wage countries? First, the effect of social protection system on economic performance. According to the conventional wisdom, you could expect countries with good social safety nets to perform badly in economic terms. But the opposite is true. The welfare state, by ensuring that more people take part in economic life, actually stimulates economic growth. Social protection, far from being a burden, must be regarded as a productive factor, offering security for individuals and making economic change socially and politically acceptable. Then there is the social justice aspect. Economic progress does not automatically bring benefits to all. A purely market-based income distribution would leave around 40% of all households in Europe below the poverty line. Thanks to the tax and social protection system in Europe, nearly 100 million people, almost a quarter of European population, are saved from that danger. Poverty is now reduced to around 18% of European households, and this is far too much. The European social model, in its many different forms, has been highly successful in improving living standards and distributing opportunities. But this does not mean we can leave Europe's social protection system as they are. We are facing big challenges. I am convinced that we have to continue to work to reform and modernize the European social model, not because we would otherwise be unable to compete with lower wage countries or high-tech countries, but because we need to cope with demographic change in Europe and the impact of new technologies on labor market. Let me focus on just one of the major emerging problems, the aging of population. By 2055, an extra 37 million people aged over 60 will be living in the present European Union. And this does not include the member states which have joined us by them. Nearly 1/3 of the population, over 113 million people, will be pensioners. This is a matter of concern for every European government because it means the costs of health care and pension will rise continuously in the coming years. At the same time, the proportion of the population actually working and paying income tax will decrease with the number of school children and students. How then should we meet the increasing health care and pension costs? Cutting education budget, increasing level of income tax, private insurance schemes. Cuts in the education budget would be neither sufficient nor opportune. It is true that there will be fewer young people around and therefore less will have to be spent in education. That is true. But the resources saved will be needed to retrain the working population and boost their productivity. Nor can we afford to place a huge tax burden on business if we want to create jobs. After all, our aim is to shift the main welfare burden away from pension and toward job creation and vocational training. While continuing to care for our senior citizens, we must invest much more heavily in young people. I do not have a precise recommendation as to how this should be done in Europe. I said I do not believe the Commission should seek to harmonize welfare system across Europe. In accordance with the principle of subsidiarity, welfare decisions are a matter for the individual member state. But these are also matters of common concern, and we need to work together in the European Union to modernize our social protection system. This is one of the main priorities of the European Commission, which can and will exercise leadership by offering some guiding principles. It can also play a facilitating role and offer technical expertise at the discussion on employment and the labor market. The Commission aim has been and still is to stimulate debate in the member states. Four key objectives are set for this strategy, which the Council has been asked to endorse: to make work pay and provide secure income, to make pensions safe and pension systems sustainable, to promote social inclusion, to ensure high quality and sustainable health care. One of the ideas already being discussed with interest is a higher retirement age. Member states are moving in the direction of increase the age of retirement, but at present, far less than half of all men and even fewer women in the age bracket between 55 and 64 are in work. And early retirement packages are still labor market instruments widely used to reduce unemployment. Member states, other institutions, social partners, social security institutions, non-government organizations have been asked to contribute to debate on all aspects of welfare reform. I am confident that we will make progress during the closing week of the Finnish presidency and that further important steps will be taken under the Portuguese and French presidency next year. Let me turn down to the last point. One of the major challenges facing the European Union is the project of building a new wing to the European House. In other words, enlargement. I said at the start of this talk that our goal, in line with the vision of the founding father, is to build a stable, peaceful, prosperous, and democratic Europe, in which the rule of law prevails and human rights are respected. Achieving this goal poses a formidable challenge, and it requires a long-range planning. Readiness involves taking certain important political steps. All candidate countries must, before accession, have institutions which guarantee democracy, the rule of law, and the respect for minorities. The prospect of European Union membership is a powerful incentive for candidates to make progress in this direction. And it's very interesting to read the annual reports on the new countries that have asked to enter. The progress in the real democracy, respect for minorities, democracy, in parliament rules, rules of law, the judicial system working, they are enormous. We are really helping to create a continent of democracy. And for the first time, Europe is trying to unify itself in democracy, not through violence or through wars. This is a fantastic effort that has never been done in history. And on the economic front, they have a working market economy, and this year by year is progressing in this direction. And we have to give to these countries every assistance and encouragement. The road to accession will be long and hard for some of the candidates. We in the European institution must do all we can to help them along that road, because it's vital they do not lose heart and they give up to the struggle. It would be a disaster if they lose heart. All is clearly takes on added significance in the light of the recent event in the Balkans. The fragmentation of the former Yugoslavia has led to wars in Bosnia and Kosovo and to instability in other Balkan countries, which will be immediate neighbors of the enlarged European Union. It is therefore in our interest to find effective ways to help stabilize the region of our continent. One option we are actively considering is to offer the Balkan countries the prospect of the European Union accession negotiation once they have met certain important preconditions. We must offer them a light at the end of the tunnel. Otherwise, there will be no peace. It's impossible to make living together so many people that hate each other since so many centuries if we don't offer them a new prospect. And this prospect can only be the hope to be member states, someday member state of the European Union. And we hope that we can afford all this problem. We want to do it in the next future. We shall start in the next year a new intergovernmental conference to prepare the European Union to tackle these great historical goals. I have said more than enough to show that there are formidable challenges facing Europe, but I want to conclude by assuring you that I am optimistic about the future. I am optimistic about the capacity to modernize our labor market, our social protection system, and our industrial relations. I am optimistic about our potential to create employment. I am optimistic because several member states have already achieved good growth and high employment while maintaining their own ambition version of the European social model. And I am also optimistic because growth is taking moment in Europe. And I think that really we may have the fruit of the common currency and of the fight against inflation that has been successful in the recent year. Our immediate task is to capitalize on the hard work we have already done, investing in a more successful economic and social model, and building a culture of economic dynamism, social inclusion, and participation. The beginning of the new millennium is an ideal time to make this transition to a more dynamic economy and a more inclusive society. Education, vocational training, healthcare, social security, pension, these are all fields in which European governments need to think the future together. Will our countries individually and collectively be able to modernize the European social model, creating an equitable and sustainable system for the years to come? This is probably the acid test of our ability to adopt what I call the new way. It is indeed new because it's based not on political ideology, but on clearly understanding the complexity of the problems and searching for practical solutions. Europe has become moving in the right direction, and our citizens have increasingly higher expectations of what we can deliver. Everybody wants our society productive potential to be freed up so Europe can compete effectively on world markets and achieve sustainable growth. But our citizens do not want the European social model to be dismantled. They want modernized and made both fair and efficient. A shining example of what an equitable and sustainable society can be in the 21st century. And we cannot disappoint them because Europe is necessary for peace, growth, and equity, and democracy in the new world of tomorrow. And I hope and I wish that this continue to be done in complete agreement and with stronger and stronger links with the United States. Thank you so much.
It's now my great pleasure to bring to the podium the person who is frankly most responsible for the good things that are happening at NYU Law School. We call him the Uber Dean, the Over Dean. He is the director of our Global Law School program, my colleague Norman Dawson.
Thank you so much. It's a great pleasure. Thank you very much, Professor Dawson, Dean Sexton, President Oliva, to my fellow leaders, and especially to our host, Prime Minister and Mrs. Dilemma. Let me say a special word of appreciation to my good friend Romano Prodi for the very good outline he has given us of the challenges facing not only the nations of Europe, but the United States and all other economies more or less positioned as we are. The hour is late, and what I think I would like to do is to briefly comment on why we're here and what exactly are the elements of progressive governance in the 21st century, what do we have consensus on, and what are the outstanding challenges facing us, without going into any detail in the hopes that that's what will be discussed tomorrow. First of all, I think it's worth noting that it's entirely fitting that we're meeting here at this beautiful villa in this great city where the Italian Renaissance saw its greatest flowering, because we know instinctively that we now have a chance at the turn of the millennium to shape another extraordinary period of human progress and creativity. There are many parallels to the Renaissance era in this time. For at the dawn of the Renaissance, Italy was a place of great economic ferment and change, rapidly expanding trade, new forms of banking and finance, new technologies and new wealth, more education, vibrant culture, broader horizons. Today we have the internet, the global economy, exploding diversity within and across national lines, the simultaneous emergence of global cultural movements, breathtaking scientific advances in everything from the human genome to discoveries about black holes in the universe. We have, in addition, a much greater opportunity to spread the benefits of this Renaissance more broadly than it could have been spread 500 years ago. But there are also profound problems among and within nations. Making the most of our possibilities, giving all people a chance to seize them, minimizing the dangers to our dreams, requires us to go beyond the competing models of industrial age politics. That's why we're here. We think ideas matter. We think it's a great challenge to marry our conceptions of social justice and equal opportunity with our commitment to globalization. We think we will have to find what has often been called a third way, a way that requires governments to empower people with tools and conditions necessary for individuals, families, communities, and nations to make the most of their human potential. In the United States, we have proceeded for the last 7 years under a rubric of opportunity for all, responsibility from all, and a community of all Americans. We have also recognized something that I think is implicit in the whole concept of the European Union, which is that it is no longer possible easily to divide domestic from global political concerns. There is no longer a clear dividing line between foreign and domestic policy. And therefore, it is important that every nation and that all like-minded people have a vision of the kind of world we're trying to build in the 21st century and what it will take to build that world. I think there is an emerging consensus, which you heard in Romano Prodi's remarks, about what works and what challenges remain. There is also a clearer consensus that no one has all the answers. So let me briefly give you an outline of what I hope we will discuss tomorrow and in the months and years ahead. First, I think there is an economic consensus that market economics, fiscal discipline, expanded trade and investment in people and emerging technologies is good economics. In the United States, it has given us an unparalleled economic expansion the lowest unemployment rate in 30 years, the lowest inflation rate in 30 years, the lowest welfare rolls in 30 years, the lowest unemployment among our women in the workforce in 46 years, the lowest poverty rates in 20 years, and the first back-to-back surpluses in our budget in over 40 years. But there are problems. I will get to them. On social questions, I think there is an emerging consensus that we should favor equal opportunity, inclusion of all citizens in our community, and an insistence upon personal responsibility. In addition to low welfare rolls, through welfare reform in the United States, it has given us the lowest crime rate in 25 years and unprecedented opportunities for women, racial minorities, and gays to serve in public life and to be a part of public discourse. We have also worked particularly hard to reconcile the competing religious concerns of our increasing diverse communities of faith in the United States. The challenges to this economic and social policy are, it seems to me, as follows. And this is where we have to close the gap. Number one, what Mr. Prodi talked about quite a lot, the aging of all of our societies. In the next 30 years, the number of people over 65 in our country will double. I hope to be one of them. Now, this is a high-class problem. In all the advanced economies, anyone who lives to be 65 today has a life expectancy of 82. Within a decade, the discoveries in the Human Genome Project will lead every young mother, including Mrs. Blair, within a matter of years, young mothers will go home from the hospital with their babies with a little genomic map. And it will tell these mothers and the fathers of the children what kinds of things they can do to maximize the health, the welfare, and the life expectancy of their children. Many of our best experts believe that within a decade, children born in advanced societies will have a life expectancy of 100 years. Now, this is a terrific thing, but in the short run, it means that within 30 years, more or less, all of our societies will have only 2 people working for every 1 person retired. Challenge number 1. Challenge number 2, in spite of unprecedented economic prosperity in many places, there are still people and places that have been left behind. I'll give you the most stark example. In America, we have the lowest unemployment rate in 30 years, 4.1%. On the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation in South Dakota, the home of the Lakota Sioux, the unemployment rate is 73%. And in many of our inner cities and many of our rural areas, this recovery simply has not reached because of the lack of educational level of the people, or because of the digital divide, or because of the absence of a conducive investment environment. But every advanced society that seeks social justice and equal opportunity cannot simply rest on economic success in the absence of giving all people the chance to succeed. Number 3, there has by and large in all of our societies, with heavy reliance on the market, been an increase in income inequality. I'm happy to say it is moderating in the United States. In countries that have chosen to make sure that did not happen, very often there have been quite high levels of unemployment, which people also find unacceptable, and which is another form of social inequality. Next problem, with more and more people in the workforce, both women and men, and more children being raised in homes that are either single-parent homes or 2-parent homes where both the parents work, it is absolutely imperative that we strike the right balance between work and family. In this case, I think virtually every European country has done a better job than the United States in providing adequate family leave policies, adequate child care policies, adequate supports. But let me just put it in this way. If most parents are going to work, either because they have to or they want to, then every society must strive for the proper balance, because if you have to choose between succeeding at home and succeeding at work, then you are defeated before you begin. The most important job of any society is raising children. It dwarfs in significance any other work. On the other hand, yes, you may clap for that, I appreciate that. An important issue that will only grow more significant in the years ahead. The next big issue, I believe, is the balancing of economic growth and environmental protection. And because of the problem of global warming, we will have to prove not only that we can maintain the quality of the environment, but that we can actually improve it while we grow the economy. I want to say a little more about that later, but it's a very important issue. Finally, I would like to put another issue on the table. There is a political problem with achieving this vision. And I'll give you just 3 examples involving all of us here. In order to pursue this economic and social vision, if you start from a position of economic difficulty and you believe that fiscal discipline is a part of your proposal that is necessary, then you're going to have upfront pain for long-term gain. And the question is, will we be able to develop a progressive governance that will be able to sustain enough support from the people to get to the gain part? Because everybody likes to talk about sacrifice, but no one likes to experience it. Everyone likes to talk about change, but we always want someone else to go first. And I have seen it in our country. I was elected in 1992, and in 1993 I implemented my economic program. And in 1994, the public had not felt the benefits of it. And that's one of the big reasons we got Congress of the other party. Chancellor Schroeder is facing the same sort of challenges. President Cardozo is facing the same sort of challenges. So it's all very well for us to come here when, as in my case, that things are rocking along well in our country and the public is supporting us, but I think it's important that we acknowledge if we believe in these ideas, they will often have to be pursued when they are controversial, in the knowledge that these difficult changes have to be made in order to have results over the long term. And so one of the things I hope we'll be able to frankly discuss is how we can develop and sustain political support for like-minded people in all countries who are determined to pursue this approach that we all know works and has to be pursued in order to create the kind of future we want for our children and grandchildren. Now let me just say a word about global politics. I believe there's an emerging consensus that it's good for the world to promote peace and prosperity and freedom and security through expanded trade, through debt relief for the poorest nations, through policies that advance human rights and democracies, through policies in the developing countries that expand the rights and opportunities of women and their daughters, through policies that stand against terrorism, against the proliferation of weapons of mass destruction, and against the spread of ethnic, racial, and religious hatred. What are the specific challenges to this consensus? I'll just mention a few. How do you place a human face on the global economy? We're going to have a WTO ministerial in Washington State in a few days. There'll be 10 times as many people demonstrating outside the hall as there will be inside. And I understand more than half of them may not even be from the United States. I personally think this is a good thing. Why? Because the truth is that ordinary people all over the world are not so sure about the globalization of the economy. They're not so sure they're going to benefit from trade. They want to see if there can be a human face on the global economy, if we can raise labor standards for ordinary people, if we can continue to improve the quality of life, including the quality of the environment. And if we believe, we who say we believe in social justice and the market economy, really want to push it, we have to prove that the globalization of the economy can really work for real people. And it's a huge challenge. Number two, we have to deal with the fact that about half the world still lives on less than $2 a day. So for most of them, most of this discussion tonight is entirely academic, which is why debt relief is so important. We have to deal with the fact that while we talk about having smaller, more entrepreneurial government, the truth is in a lot of poor countries, they don't have any government at all with any real fundamental capacity to do the things that have to be done. Even in a lot of more developed countries, they found themselves blindsided by the financial crisis that struck in 1997. So we have to acknowledge, while we who say we are developing a third way, and in our case, we've been able to do it with the smallest federal government in 37 years, we have to acknowledge the fact that some countries need more government. They need capacity. They need the ability to battle disease and run financial systems and solve problems. And that it is fanciful to talk about a lot of this until you can basically deal with malaria, deal with AIDS. You look at Africa, for example, AIDS consuming many African countries, but Uganda has had the biggest drop in the AIDS rates of any country in the world because of the capacity of the government to deal with the problem. And I think we have to forthrightly deal with that. Let me just mention a couple of other issues a little closer to home. We're going to have to deal with the conflict between science and economics and social values. Example, the conflict between the United States and Europe over genetically modified seeds and the growing and selling of food. The conflict between Britain and France over the sale of beef. Listen, this is hot stuff now, but you can see that there's going to be a lot more of this. And we have to find a way to manage this if we're going to be in a global society with a global economy where there are honest differences and real fears. We have to find a way to manage this that has integrity and that generates trust among ordinary people. Another problem that I think is quite important is all of us will have to decide how we're going to cooperate and when we separate in an interdependent world. I think, for example, our Congress did a very good thing to finally pay our UN dues and to enable the United States to participate in the global debt relief movement. And I think they made a mistake to defeat the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty. But every one of us will have to deal with these kinds of questions because there will always be domestic pressures operating against responsible interdependence and cooperation. And finally, I'll mention two other things. I believe that the biggest problems to our security in the 21st century and to this whole modern form of governance will probably come not from rogue states or from people with competing views of the world in governments, but from the enemies of the nation state, from terrorists and drug runners and organized criminals, who I predict will increasingly work together and increasingly use the same things that are fueling our prosperity. Open borders, the internet, the miniaturization of all sophisticated technology, which will manifest itself in smaller and more powerful and more dangerous weapons. And we have to find ways to cooperate to deal with the enemies of the nation state if we expect progressive governments to succeed. The last and most important point of all, I believe, is this. I think the supreme irony of our time is we talk about a new renaissance. By the way, that would make New York University the successor of the Medicis. I think that, consider this, the supreme irony of this time is that we are sitting around talking about finding out the secrets of the black holes in the universe, unlocking the mysteries of the human gene, having unprecedented growth, and dealing with what I consider to be very high-class problems, finding the right balance between unemployment and social justice, dealing with the aging of society. Isn't it interesting to you that in this most modern of ages, the biggest problem of human societies is the most primitive of all social difficulties? The fear of people who are different from us. That, after all, is what is at the root of what Prime Minister Blair has struggled with in Northern Ireland, at the root of all the problems in the Balkans, at the root of the tribal wars in Africa, at the root of the still unresolved, though hopefully progressing, problems in the Middle East. A few weeks ago, Hillary invited two men to the White House for a conversation about the new millennium. One was one of the founders of the internet. The other was one of our principal scientists unlocking the mysteries of the human genome. And they talked together. It was fabulous because these guys said, number one, we would not know anything about the gene if it were not for the computer revolution, because we couldn't have done the complex sequencing. And then the scientists said, now that they've done all this complex sequencing, the most stunning conclusion they had drawn is that all human beings were 99.9% the same genetically. And that the differences of individuals in any given ethnic group genetically were greater than the genetic differences of one ethnic group to another. So if you had 100 West Africans and 100 Italians and 100 Mexicans and 100 Norwegians, the differences of the individuals within the groups would be greater than the composite genetic profile differences of one group to another. Now, this is in an age where 800,000 people were slaughtered by machetes in 90 days in Rwanda a few years ago, when 250,000 Bosnians lost their lives and 2.5 million more were made refugees. So that's the last point I'd like to make. We need a little humility here. What we really need to be struggling for is not all the answers, but a unifying vision that makes the most of all these wonders and relishes all this diversity, which makes life more interesting, but proceeds on the fundamental fact that the most important thing is what it has always been, our common humanity, which imposes on us certain responsibilities about how we live, how we treat others who are less fortunate, how we empower everyone to have a chance to live up to his or her God-given potential. If you ask me one thing we could do, it would not be all the modern ideas. If I had to leave tonight and never have another thing to say about public life, I would say if we could find a way to enshrine a reverence for our common humanity, the rest would work out just fine. Thank you very much.